What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Backup Fantasy Sports. I'm your host, Ewan Leaf, and today is Friday, April 22nd, 2022. And we're going to be talking about some Formula One fantasy with the Imola Grand Prix preview. So today I'm going to go over the track, what to watch, get into some of the fantasy stats on the drivers with their streaks, their ownership, their points per million, some price changes. And then if we have enough time, I'm going to go over some Draftkings DFS picks, as Draftkings now has Formula One as an option there. So it's going to be very wet in Imola this weekend. It is officially called the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix, but a lot of people will just call it Imola. Up until about 2006, it was called the San Marino Grand Prix, and it takes place at the Autodromo Enzo Edino Ferrari. First Grand Prix was in 1980, and this weekend we are looking at a different schedule than we have been used to for the first three races. So on Friday, we have free practice one, and then immediately after that is going to be qualifying at 11 a.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. local time. So qualifying is on Friday because it's going to set the grid for the sprint race. The first of three sprint races this season happens in Imola. That's going to happen on Saturday after another practice session. So practice session qualifying on Friday, then another practice on Saturday, and then the sprint race at 10:30 a.m. Eastern on Saturday morning for you guys in the States. And the winner of that sprint race will determine who starts on pole in the race on Sunday. So that's kind of the deal. And then on Sunday, 63 laps around a 4.9 kilometer circuit. So the drivers are just going to go over 309 kilometers on that race on Sunday. So what to watch this weekend? Just kind of touched on it there, but first sprint race of the weekend, 21 laps, 100 kilometers. Grid decided by Friday's qualifying session. There are points awarded for the drivers' championship standings here. So first place is going to get 8, second gets 7, third gets 6, so on and so forth, all the way down to 8th, who gets 1 point here, which is a change from last season where it was only 3 points for first place, 2 points for second place, and 1 point for third place. So they're making the sprints more important, and there's 3 of them this year. First one's obviously here in Imola. Second one's going to be in Austria. And then the third one will be at the tail end of the season in Sao Paulo. Teams can decide whatever tire they want to choose. No mandatory pit stops. So Alexander Albon will be very happy with that. And yeah, it's going to be a crazy weekend with the way it's the first kind of format this way for the season. The sprint race was done a little differently last year as well. But yeah, very excited to see the sprint race and how that weaves its way into our Formula One fantasy rosters. It's a home race for Ferrari, and they're coming in as the strong favorites. Charles Leclair leads the Drivers' Championships by 34 points right now over George Russell, and that was a bigger gap than at any time in the 2021 season between first and second. So already Leclerc has made himself head and shoulders above the competition right now, thanks to Mercedes underperforming and Red Bull's lack of reliability. So everyone seems to think that Ferrari are the favorite this weekend. A lot of people even picking Charles and Carlos, the newly signed Carlos Sainz, who will now be with Ferrari through 2024. They're picking them to kind of go 1-2 all weekend. So that'll be very interesting. And that could, there'll only be 4 races in, but it'll be getting late early for the rest of the competition as Ferrari stretch their lead out this season. Another thing to watch is Red Bull's reliability. So, biggest storyline from the first 3 races, other than Charles Leclerc getting 2 wins, is probably Max Verstappen not finishing 2 races. Can the reliability be fixed? Red Bull have kind of been vague about what's been going on. The overarching point is that it's definitely in the fuel system. Not sure if it's from the porpoising causing issues with the fuel system, but pretty much on the weekend warm up, Sam Collins was saying that Red Bull are just considering it a fuel leak at this point. Next up on something to watch will be whether McLaren's Australian success can carry over to Imola. Everyone seemed pleasantly surprised in the McLaren paddock about what happened in Australia with Lando Norris qualifying in fourth, and then him and Daniel Ricciardo finishing fifth and sixth on race day. It's been talked about a lot. Obviously, McLaren had a disastrous start in Bahrain. Saudi Arabia got a little bit better. And then Australia seemed to really show promising signs. But listening to some of the quotes and some of the analysis, a lot of people seem to think that it was a track result. So just McLaren were their car was just better suited for Australia than some other teams, unlike Haas, who have kind of looked stronger than McLaren already this season. So it does feel like there could be a step back for McLaren this weekend, which would be disappointing because after Australia, Lando Norris jumped all the way back up from 15.4 to 15.9 million in the F1 fantasy game. I jumped on it around, I think I saw him at 15.5, used one of my subs to get him back in my team. But depending what we see in free practice, I think he could be gone from my lineup this weekend. As I mean, him and Daniel and a lot of other people seem to think that Australia was encouraging, but not a sign of things to come in the future for the team in orange. And then finally is, can Haas bounce back? They were one of the teams that never seemed to get the car set up correctly in Australia. Mick Schumacher did make it to Q2, but he couldn't get a point on Sunday. Kevin Magnussen also had a disappointing Sunday, but he was dealing with some illness issues. So we'll see. 2 weeks off, maybe he's back to race fitness. And Haas looked very strong in the first two races of the year. So I wouldn't be getting away from them too much in the fantasy game. I actually brought Kevin Magnussen back into my lineup after getting him out of there for Australia after his poor practice sessions. So kind of that's what I'll be kind of looking for this weekend. The problem is it is 7:34 here in Germany, AM time. And the qualifying is in about 9 hours. So you're gonna have to learn a lot from free practice one because qualifying is when our F1 fantasy lineups will lock for the whole weekend. We will get points for qualifying, we'll get points for the sprint and the race, but we're not gonna have 3 practice sessions of data to figure out who looks good and who looks bad. So it's gonna be kind of flying by the seat of our pants a little bit here and seam of our pants, sorry. And it's going to be very interesting to see what happens in the game this weekend with a lack of data. But drivers on streaks right now. We're starting to get to the streak point of the season. Ferrari had it last week with, or last race with their race and qualifying streak for the constructors, but they couldn't cash in on it in the race because Carlos Sainz spun out within the first 5 laps, but they did get the qualifying bonus streak. So, but drivers right now on a qualifying streak who have qualified in Q3 every race so far this season: Max Verstappen, George Russell, Charles Leclerc, Carlos Sainz, Sergio Perez, and Fernando Alonso. And then for a race streak, it's Lewis Hamilton, George Russell, Charles Leclerc, Esteban Ocon have all finished the first 3 races inside the top 10. And that makes George Russell and Charles Leclerc the only 2 racers in the game right now who can have a streak ready to go when we reach Miami in a couple of weeks' time. So that would be a priority for me. I mean, Leclerc is still under that 20 million price point. I expect that to massively, well, see, the problem is you'd think it was going to get above 20 million pretty quickly, but he's already on 66% of everyone's team in the F1 fantasy game. So can this price creep over 20 million at this point? He's about he's point he's up point one on the race week, and as of right now, he is. I think I saw this morning he was 80% of the way to 80% of the way to another point one increase. But he's already at 18.8. Like, it feels like it's starting to slow down for Charles Leclerc. He could be just the auto turbo driver for the rest of the year if he doesn't creep above that 20 million price point for the year. So he's probably going to be good for Ferrari. He's going to be good for Miami, for Imola. He's the favorite this weekend. And if he gets through this weekend clean, qualifies in Q3, gets through the race in the top 10, like immediately activating the mega driver chip for Miami, where he's going to score 3 times as many points. But who else is rostered or in other teams' lineups? So Magnussen's at 53%, Carlos Sainz 48%. So Ferrari is very popular right now. Bottas at 46, Verstappen 35, Perez 34. Norris is all the way back up at 30, but that may drop if McLaren don't look great in FP1 here this morning. And then just a couple of notables. George Russell's up to 21%, and Hamilton is all the way down at 13% because he is just not producing. As for the constructors, there's only 3 teams rostered above 10% right now. Ferrari's at 54%, and Red Bull and McLaren are both at 11%, with Haas, Mercedes, and Alpine all at 6, 5, and 5. So, yeah, Ferrari. I mean, if you want to keep your team's overall standing in the world aloft right now, it sounds like you're going to have to triple up on Ferrari. I currently am. I will not be changing that until further notice because they look like the strongest, and just a couple of bad luck moments here for Carlos Sainz in Australia really cost him. He was on a flying lap in Q3 that was canceled out by a red flag, and the provisional time would have had him in 4th place instead of 9th, where Ferrari decided to go on the hard tires. And then on F1 TV, they broke down how Ferrari put in a new steering wheel in his car right before the race, and it just totally messed him up, and he couldn't really do what he wanted in the turns, and just broke too late trying to pass Mick Schumacher, and just a disastrous weekend for Carlos Sainz. But he's still on a three qualifying streak here, so not a bad option. It's going to be interesting if Charles Leclerc ever gets above 20 million, if people will move their turbo driver to Sergio Perez or just go with Carlos Sainz, Leclerc's Ferrari teammate. As for bang for your buck rankings, points per $1 million, K-Mag still up there at 7.83, with Leclerc at 7.39. Esteban Ocon, whose worst finish this season has been P7, 4.84, brilliant option. He might be where I go this weekend if McLaren don't look that great, because Alpine looked fairly strong. They looked awesome in Australia, and they also had a bad luck with a hydraulic issue, I believe, that cost Fernando Alonso a really good shot at the front row in Australia, because he was flying around Albert Park in Melbourne. And then Alexander Albon comes in at 3.94, George Russell 3.64, and then Perez, Sainz, Norris, Hamilton, Verstappen all at 3.38 or below. Verstappen's actually at 1.78. So right now, with how much you have to commit to him, he could win a race anytime he gets on the track, but right now there's Leclair's in a more reliable car. Sainz is in a more reliable car, and those guys are combined are only like 5 million more than one Max Verstappen. So just do the maths and you'll be fine. So price rises for the last 2 weeks. George Russell's gone up 0.3. Leclerc, as I mentioned, has only gone up 0.1. Lando Norris shot back up with 0.5. Zhou Guanyu, Alfa Romeo's up to 0.3, which was kind of strange because Alfa Romeo had a pretty bad weekend in Australia. As for price fallers, Pierre Gasly's down 0.2, Hamilton's down 0.2, Albon still like fell down 0.2, even though he was phenomenal in Australia, going 57 laps on one set of tires and then pitting at the end. And Mick Schumacher fell as well. Maybe people think that Haas is bouncing back, but it might be K-Mag that gets some of the upgrades going on there. So I did watch weekend warm-up this morning on F1's YouTube channel. They were talking about how wet it was, talk about Ferrari or Mercedes feel better after Australia, but they're still behind Ferrari and Red Bull. And these are just some notes that I picked up from it, so you don't have to. They're excited to see the cars in the rain for the first time this season, the new 2022 cars in the rain for the first time. So that will be interesting. But yeah, Mercedes happy with George's podium, feel better after Australia, but they know the problem, but they still haven't found the solutions to the problem. So that's going to be an issue. I think they're going to go to Miami and then start to try and get upgrades going in Barcelona. Red Bull, Sam Collins was talking about how they could be looking at penalties pretty quickly with how many power units they're going through. But Christian Horner said that he would rather have a fast, unreliable car than a slow, reliable car. But it does seem to be a fuel system issue. So if that can get fixed, Red Bull should shoot back up the drivers and constructors standings. But it will be interesting to see if Ferrari can go 1-2 this weekend, have a really strong weekend. Like, will it already be too late? I don't think so. I think everyone's so excited about the new season. I mean, this is only the 4th race. There's so much of the season still to go. Like, we're one disastrous Ferrari weekend away from it just all being blown wide open again. So let's not get ahead of ourselves. Alpine brought a upgrade to Imola. It was a new floor, so that should be interesting. They could be at the top of the midfield. Esteban scored in all 3 races. And Fernando Alonso is a very happy chappy because he thinks he could have had an incredible weekend in Australia, but just ran into some bad luck. They talked about McLaren, can't say McLaren, thinking that Australia could be a track result. They know which tracks are going to be good for them, which are going to be weak for them. So Lando was happy to score big points, but he is in a accepting mood of where they're at right now in terms of competing with the Ferraris, Red Bulls, and Mercedes of the world. AlphaTauri also brought a new floor, and so did Alfa Romeo. And that was really it from the weekend warm-up. As for my team this week, so right now I have Leclair with the turbo driver, Carlos Sainz, Sergio Perez, K-Mag, and Lando Norris with Ferrari as my constructor. My team value is at 103.1 million. And I think the move for me is probably going to be, I'm kind of buying into the Alpine hype. So I think I am going to replace Lando Norris with Esteban Ocon just because he's finished 3 races. P7 is his worst finish. I will wait until FP1 is completed to make that move just to make sure everyone gets through it okay. But yeah, really impressed with Alpine this season. Fernando Alonso's looked really strong. On weekend warm-up, they called them the La strategy, the La driver, the La driver. Love that. Love, or L driver, La driver. So loving that combo with Fernando Alonso and Esteban Ocon in the French car. So yeah, I think maybe if Alonso looks a little bit stronger than Ocon in FP1, I'll go with him. But they're both, Ocon's 12.6 and Alonso is 12.5. And I'll probably just keep it simple there. And we saw a lot more price variance going on in the game this week. So I think Miami may be the time for, if I'm trying to bank some more team value here, I may be activating my wild card, but I will talk more about that when I have my Imola Grand Prix review show or podcast next week. As for Draftkings, let's scoot along here. On rotoballer.com, I will be writing the DFS article for the Imola Grand Prix this weekend. It is quite a confusing point system going on here. They're just developing it this season, but if you've ever played on DraftKings with like a captain showdown mode in football or baseball, you get one captain and you get 4 drivers and 1 constructor. One of your drivers will be your captain, and he will earn 1.5 times the fantasy points as everyone else. It's only for race day, so no qualifying, no sprints. So really, you can only set your lineup after the sprint race on Saturday night, because then you'll really know the starting grid. They have drivers earn points based on their finishing position in the top 10, their spots versus grid. So that's like positional gains. So different amounts of overtakes get plus 10 points, plus 5 points, plus 3, or minus 3. So that kind of deal there. So yeah, let's get into it really quickly. Charles Leclair comes in here as 600, or he's at 11,000 right now. He's 600 more than Verstappen, with Carlos Sainz at 10, Lewis Hamilton at 9.6, Sergio Perez at 9, and George Russell at 8.6. So let's just build a quick DraftKings lineup here on the fly. So everyone thinks that Charles Leclerc is the favorite this weekend. So let's get him at the captain spot. So that means he's 11,000 as a driver, but he's actually 16,500 as your captain. Next, let's see. Do we want to go Ferrari double up here? Yeah. So we got Charles Leclerc, Carlos Sainz, and then I'll put my money where my mouth is. I'll go double Alpine here. So that means I got 2 Ferrari, 2. Or hold on, that was Kevin Magnussen. I do not want Kevin Magnussen. I want Fernando Alonso here. So that gives me Leclerc, Sainz, Ocon, and Alonso. Got 11,300 left. Also got to get a constructor in, and Ferrari's at 11.6. So if you go too big in your drivers, the constructor is going to have to pay here. So let's see. Maybe I don't go Carlos Sainz. Maybe because he's at 10. So who am I feeling good about here? If I get K-Mag in here, I can go with Ferrari, and that leaves me enough money to go with Zhou Guanyu, Alexander Albon, Sebastian Vettel, Lance Stroll, or Nicholas Latifi. Let's just say Alexander Albon, because that was a great drive, and that leaves me with $700. So, just built one on the fly there, but I feel pretty good with, like, Charles. Probably he should win the race. It seems home race for Ferrari in front of the Italian fans should be a strong weekend for them. K-Mag bouncing back. Ocon, Alonso in the Alpine car looking great. Alexander Albon just as a throwaway. Let's see what happens here. And Ferrari as the constructor. So got the most expensive driver, most expensive constructor here, along with 4 middling guys. But yeah, McLaren overpriced for sure here. I think the Alpine double up is going to be extremely popular on this race weekend, as Ocon is 5.4, and Fernando Alonso is 5.8. But man, that was a whirlwind preview of the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix, or the Imola Grand Prix, whatever you want to call it. I will be back. Trying to think. Possibly Sunday night, but if not, it may need to be pushed off to Wednesday because of some writing commitments with baseball and basketball. But that DraftKings article will go up on rotoballer.com sometime tomorrow night after the sprint race. So I will know the starting grid and who's looked good and who's looked not so good. But still very excited about this Formula One fantasy season, the F1 season in general. I'm on the last episode of Drive to Survive. I know what happens, but I'm still very excited to watch it. They did a great job building up this rivalry, so I cannot wait to watch it. But enjoy your weekend. Don't forget that the deadline is nice and early at no, I'm already forgetting. It's before qualifying. So it's 11 a.m. Eastern is your driver lineup today to get that locked. So do not let that slip you by. But once again, thanks for listening. Enjoy the Grand Prix, enjoy the speed, and I will talk to you next time.